What's going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with this handsome devil, Adam Ronis here, and it's time for another edition of Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. Adam, what's going on? You're stuck with me for 2 shows. It must be your lucky day.
No, definitely my unlucky day. I don't know what I did to deserve this punishment to have to deal with you for more than 2 hours, but we'll get through this somehow.
Absolutely. I mean, that they want ratings, Ronis, so they know who to go to. Ronis and Fensty, the Genius Beasts, as we're called. Like that, that's our tag team nickname, Ronis.
The Genius what?
The Genius Beasts. You're the genius, and I'm the beast. That's how it works.
Yeah.
You like that?
I guess looks-wise, you do look like a beast, so I can see that.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, and I really appreciate that. Ronis, let's talk about something else that's a beast, and that's the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide, which all of you could get along with our baseball content. 1997, fantasyalarm.com/NFL Draft Guide. Ronis, you've been busy with that draft guide too. You wrote a little article everybody should read about waivers throughout the season. It's one thing when you're setting your league rules and how you're going to do waivers between Waiver Priority and Fab, but it's quite another in-season management of that budget. Now, Ronis, I hate Waiver Priority. In fact, I hate it so much that I asked at Fantasy Sports on Twitter before our stream here for any kind of justification on why you do Waiver Priority over Fab. I got 0 responses, Ronis. Can you think of any reason why we should still be doing Waiver Priority? Is this 2002?
No, I don't have any. I don't play in any leagues that use it. Pretty much all my leagues use Fab, and it's the way to go. You know, I always say that there's always some element of luck involved in fantasy sports, and we're always trying to decrease that luck factor because we want it to be more skill. It's never going to be 100% skill, but when you have the waiver wire priority, you know, people just sit there and they kind of wait to use that number 1 pick. You know, they're waiting for that big running back injury that happens on a given week where that backup running back is not owned on most rosters, and you just get lucky and, all right, now I got this guy. And that shouldn't be the case. You know, it should be everyone gets a shot at a big free agent any week. Like, just because you have a great week 1 and some other team in your league has a bad week 1 doesn't mean that they should get the priority of the pickup for that week. So, you know, Fab is definitely, to me, the most fair. I'm pretty sure, I think in every football league I played in last year, I think every league was Fab. And I played in about 13 leagues last year. So I think it's definitely the way to go. It's most fair. And it also brings another element of skill into the game and strategy, which is what we want. So I hope that more people are going towards Fab. I think we have seen an increase, but there are still people that do use the waiver wire priority because I get questions every year. You know, do I use it this week? Do I hold the number 1 priority? Oh, you know what? Look, I forgot. I did play in one league last year. I forgot. The Lee Sam Listener League.
Yeah, how do you forget that?
Well, because I'm so used to Fab, but it was the Lee Sam Listener League because we did it on Yahoo. I believe Yahoo, I think they have Fab now. Yeah, they do have Fab because we played in a football league last year. Not a football. We did baseball where they have Fab, so they must have it.
They do.
Right. So, well, there won't be no Listener League this year, but that's another story. But I will tell her if she commissions a league again to put Fab instead of the waiver wire priority because it does suck. And I was always at the bottom of it because I was making pickups left and right.
Right. And that's what sucks. The more aggressive you are, the more you're going to be going right back to that 12 spot. And that's not where you want to be. The problem is you could suffer multiple injuries and some of your players just flat out sucking at the exact same time. What waiver priority is in terms of a disadvantage, you keep going back to the final priority spot every time, back to 12 again. Whereas with Fab, if at the time you've got enough in your budget, whether it's $100 or let's just say $1,000, and you've got enough left and your team starts to get stagnant, you get injuries and you need some key pickups, you can use the allotted budget then. And that's why, Ronis, the only reason, this is something very big we got to talk about, you just debated whether or not Yahoo has Fab. It does, but it's default for the rules, meaning that if you don't go into the rules and change it, it's still waiver priority. And that just shows whenever I see that, there's a lazy commissioner who just activated the league, just set it up bare bone, didn't go through the rules with fine-tooth comb, and now we're in the draft room. We're looking at our rules. We can't change them now. It's awful, and it's still a default on these free sites.
Yeah, I think it's also, it might be the more inexperienced player that doesn't realize that. So that's where, we have to come in and try and educate people. And, it could also be, it's also complex, I think, for some people that are just playing for the first or second time. But we want to introduce it as a more common strategy because, again, it's more fair. It's really a luck factor on the waiver wire priority. All of a sudden you're number one, and Philip Lindsay after week 1 2 years ago. All right, now you got him, and he obviously lasted the entire year. So last year, DJ Chark, Terry McLaurin in some leagues that were not very deep weren't drafted, and they were big pickups after week 1. But it should come down to whoever decides to spend the most. So always, if you are a commissioner and you are on one of these free sites, see if they do have Fab and institute that instead, and it's more fun that way too. It's always great when you look at the winning bids, and if you won a bid by $1 or $2, you feel great. If you lost that bid by $1 or $2, you feel like absolute garbage, because I know you sit there and you go, man, I had it at 234, but I decided to go down to 223, and the winning bid was 233, where if you just stuck with your initial bid, you would have won by $1. Instead, you went a few bucks less, and now you lost out on that player. So it just evokes another level of excitement, too, when you're opening the waiver wire. I mean, if you have the number one priority, you're going to get your guy. So there's no excitement there. With Fab, you're just like, all right, the anticipation. Did I get my guy? How were my bids? And it's fun. So I just think it's more strategy. It's more fair. I think everyone should get a crack at every free agent. You shouldn't be rewarded just because, you have a bad team. That's kind of on you for having a crappy draft. There's some element of bad luck. Maybe you had a lot of injuries, but that's on you. You shouldn't be rewarded for that. This is not like pro sports where you have an entire season and you get the first pick. This is after 1, 2, 3 weeks. So we've seen teams that are pretty good after 3 weeks just struggle, and they shouldn't be rewarded either. It should come down to whoever wants to spend the most money. So I definitely implore everyone to change to Fab, and I think people who have made that move don't regret it.
Just came to my mind here, Ronis. Are you in any leagues, because I'm not in any leagues like this, where the bidding process during Fab is actually public? You can see who has the highest bid before time runs out, or is it all silent bidding where you can't see anything?
Why would you see bids? I mean, that makes no sense.
I was trying to think if there is a way, because I'm always thinking how to further change fantasy football if we're going to change it at all, and we're going to convince people on having an open bidding process for it. But I feel like at that point, there's going to offer collusion with that. You're going to have someone there to be like, hey, you still have enough of your budget. Stop this team from getting that player. Literally something that just came to mind.
No, that doesn't work. It's got to be blind bids.
Right.
The other way doesn't work. It's blind bids. Again, that's what the high stakes leagues use. And there you could, I don't think in every format, I don't think you could see the runner-up bids. I like the ones where you can. I know in the high stakes leagues, you can see the runner-up bids, which is always great to see.
Free sites you can. I know on Yahoo at least you can.
Okay, I think on CBS you can't, because I don't recall seeing the runner-up bids, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And I have played on CBS. Maybe there's a way to see it, and I don't know. But I like seeing the runner-up bids because you want to know if you overpaid by a lot or if you won by $1 or $2. I mean, it's always great when you win a Fab bid by $1 or $2. I mean, it's like the best. It's like, all right, I got this right.
Yeah, exactly. No, and it's great. And it also will show you, especially if you're seeing player after player, who else is bidding on that player, what positions they're prioritizing. And then thus from there, maybe you offer a little trade. Maybe you have depth at that spot. Or you're playing that team that week, and let's just say you have a rotating roster spot. You see a receiver, you know that this team is in for another receiver. You just snipe them. Ronis, there's a whole other wave of strategy that you could use by seeing the runner-up bids, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I tend not to do that with my opponent unless it's the playoffs. That's kind of where I'm going to block them. I'm really not worried about them in week 4, week 5. I know some people are, but I don't worry about that. It also depends too on the setup. In some leagues, there's like the high stakes leagues, they have 2 fab periods, and that's it. There's no first come, first serve. Other leagues have a fab run like on a Wednesday night, and then first come, first serve opens up Friday until game time Sunday as well. So that's also affects the strategy, because if there's no $0 bids and only fab twice a week, it makes it much harder to go through the course of the season, knowing that you can't have the first come, first serve. Whereas if there are $0 bids and first come, first serve, you could be a lot more aggressive with your fab early in the year, because hey, all right, if I run out of money, I'm going to still have time later in the year because there's first come, first serve, there's $0 bids. So that also affects the strategy as well.
Do you think, and I think I asked you this on Alarm After Hours weeks ago, do you think because
I wasn't listening, so I don't know.
Yeah, at least, look, he confirmed something.
I listened.
Listen to me when I talk, ever. So there you go, Ronis.
I listen to you. I don't listen to your advice. There's a difference.
I think it's a little bit of both, Ronis. And when I say a little, I mean a lot of it. This is what you get from midnight to 2 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, Tuesday through Thursday. Ronis is too cool for school Mondays or Fridays. So you only get him in the middle of the week there, just like in the middle of the Oreo. But still, Ronis, I'm going to ask you
I don't like the middle of the Oreos.
You don't like anything, Ronis.
No, I like the top and the bottom.
Okay, so you like the cookies. There you go. Ronis, big fan of cookies. So he eats a lot of cookies. But Ronis, let's talk about some fab a little bit more. When it comes to spending, just fantasy baseball versus fantasy football, how do your strategies differ? Obviously, in a normal baseball season, there are more games, but how does spending your budget, balancing your budget change between the two sports?
It really comes down to team construction. Last year in the FSGA league, I got off to an 0-4 start, but I also knew that they reward points, top 3 points, and the top 3 records in the next 3 teams with most points. So I knew I wasn't out of it, but I still had a sense of urgency where I said, I got to play for this week. So I spent a lot of my fab, and towards the end of the year, I had nothing left, and it was $0 bids. But that's because I had a sense of urgency. Other times if I'm 4-1, 5-0, have a lot of points, I'm still looking at the waiver wire. That's another thing too, and I wrote in my article in the draft kit, you should be looking at the waiver wire every single week. I don't care if you're 5-0. I don't care if you're have a 20-point lead in baseball. You've got to look at the waiver wire every single week. There's always a player that could emerge and make a difference for the course of the season. So always play the waiver wire every week, but I think it really depends on where you are. In baseball, what are your weaknesses? Are you looking for that second or third closer? If that's the case, I'm going to be taking shots at setup men, relievers every single week. Now, obviously, with a 60-game season, it's going to be a lot different this year. Right. I think you're going to see way more aggressiveness on fab because it's a short season. If there's any closer that emerges after the first week, that guy's going to go for 70, 80, 90% of the budget. We don't have time. We can't wait. So I think this year for baseball is a totally different year compared to years past. And again, in football, it just comes down to, what you need. And also, I've always said this, to me, one of the most difficult thing in fantasy sports is giving someone a fab blueprint because it is so different from league to league. I remember a few years ago in a high stakes league, Keenan Allen was a big free agent. I don't know if it was his rookie year or second year. I can't remember what year. And, I'm like, to Dr. Roto, I'm like, oh, how much did he go for in your league? And he's like, oh, I got that Dr. Roto won him for like 234. I'm like, my bid was like over 300. In my league, he went for like 445, 444. So there you go. It's 2 different leagues, and you see the extreme difference of like over $200. So it's always kind of difficult to explain to people how much to bid. And I've always said you kind of have to look at your league early in the year, and you can get a gauge of the tendencies. All right, this is a league that's aggressive. They're going to spend. Oh, these guys are a little lax. They're not spending as much. Obviously, that really doesn't help week 1, 2, and 3. But you kind of have to get an idea. Now, after week 1, you have to look at your roster and go, all right, what do I really need? Maybe the receivers that you thought were going to break out weren't. They didn't play a lot of snaps in week 1. And here you got a guy like last year, like DJ Chark, go all in. Like DJ Chark was a guy I know I got in the FSGA after week 1. He was my big spend. 2 years ago in another league, I got Phillip Lindsay for like 2-something. So you kind of have to make a quick assessment on whether this guy's for real. We see a lot of times, though, those players after week 1, they flop. They're no good. It was a 1-week sample. So you have to try and figure out, all right, is this guy for real? Because you want that player after week 1 where he's going to help you the entire season. If you can spend, 20 to 30% of your budget, it sounds like a lot after week 1. But if they're going to help you the entire year, it's absolutely worth it. I think years ago, Jose Fernandez, the former Marlins pitcher who passed away, I think there was someone in a high stakes league who spent like $890 on him. Sounds crazy because now you got 110 for the rest of the year in a long baseball season, but he was a stud that obviously performed at that level. So that's a rare occasion that we get someone like that. But I think it's different, and it comes down to roster context on what you need.
I spent $78 on Ty Johnson last year in football. Maybe one of the biggest spends I've ever had when it came to fab. It was that tough, Ronis. I waited for that long. Kerryon Johnson goes down. I had Devonta Freeman. He sucked, and I had that combo in a lot of leagues because I don't really go too far when it comes to making my teams totally different from each other because I find myself rooting against myself constantly. I guess it's the nature of the beast if we're in 10-plus leagues for fantasy sports. So you can't really avoid it, but that's what happens. That's the risk you take. So I spent $78 on Ty Johnson. It was brutal, man. It was brutal, but that was a league in which I wasn't in contention. I was fighting for my dear life for a playoff spot. I needed to make that move now, Ronis. I couldn't lose another game. Maybe one more, but then I had a really hard stretch of the schedule left. Whereas in another league, when I was contending, I make sure in those leagues when I'm solidified in the playoffs and I know a week or two out, that I'm keeping out of 100 $25, $30 there so I can either play a little defense and block someone from, let's say, a Brashad Perriman, or if someone goes down during the playoffs, I can make that big scoop with other teams out of the league, less competition in the pool for those players off of waivers.
Yeah, I mean, for me, defense doesn't come into play till late in the year, and I think you always have to worry first and foremost about your team. Make sure you're putting out the best team possible, and, it really comes down to, I did a Ty Johnson one too, but that's because I had Kerryon Johnson and I had nothing at running back. And that team was the worst team I had last year that didn't make the playoffs in a high stakes online.
Mine too, in the same situation.
Yeah. I mean, so I knew it wasn't going to work out, but it's like, all right, if I don't get someone, then this was a league with 20 roster spots. So if I don't get someone, I'm not going to have anyone at running back. So I have to take the chance knowing that it wasn't going to work out. But sometimes you have to do that, especially if your season is on the line and you're trying to be respectable to the league and put out the best team possible. So sometimes you have to do that if you did save some of your money up. But I think don't be afraid to spend money early in the year. Again, especially if you believe in that player. I mean, DJ Chark, Terry McLaurin were two examples from last year that might not have been drafted in every league. Obviously, in very competitive leagues, 20 roster spots, yeah, those guys were drafted. But a lot of people play with 15, 16 roster spots. And maybe a lot of people didn't know about them. I mean, DJ Chark didn't have a great rookie year, so there were no stats to go on. So unless you were in a sharp league, he probably was not drafted. And then you see him perform in week 1 and you look at what was going on in Jacksonville, you got to make that quick decision to spend. And obviously it's hindsight because we saw it worked out, but you have to swing for the fences sometimes and spend that money early on, especially if you do have a hole in your roster. Now, the other side of it is, you tend to believe in the team you drafted. And after week 1, you don't have major injuries and everything looks good. It doesn't mean, all right, I'm not going to bid this week and save my money. What I like to do, especially in more competitive leagues and the high stakes leagues with 20 roster spots, I like to have 1 or 2 spots where I'm rotating. And I'm like, all right, this is the kind of the breakout anticipation spot, because in the competitive leagues and the high stakes leagues, you got to be 2 to 3 weeks out of the curve. You can't wait, man. This is not like a player has a big week and then everyone's writing about him on the waiver wire. He's gone in the high stakes leagues. He was stashed 2-3 weeks ago. So I'll always take, $1, $2, $3. This is for $1,000 fab budget, $9, $12, $13, whatever it is. If there's someone I go, you know what? This guy played a little bit more snaps this week. He looked pretty good on a couple of the receptions he had. Injury occurs here, he can step up into a big role, and I'll stash that guy on my roster. Now, how long? It's going to depend on the injuries, the bye weeks, but I'll always do that. The same thing in fantasy baseball, where you're looking ahead to 2 start pitchers. You can't wait you can't go to the waiver wire on Sunday night and go, oh, well, this guy has a 2-start week this week against Detroit and Baltimore. Someone was smart and they stashed him 2 weeks ago. So you got to look like 2 weeks ahead of the curve and plan that out and then get that pitcher for $3, $4, $5, $6, $7 cheap. Because if you wait and no one adds him and everyone sees he's got Detroit and Baltimore, well, now he's going to cost you, 125, 150. And do you really want that for just 1 2-start week? So knowing your league competition is very important as well, because if they're really sharp and it's a high-stakes league, you have to stash weeks in advance. You cannot wait for that big game to hit where everyone's talking about him that week, and it's so obvious he's the pickup of the week. It doesn't work in those competitive leagues.
Your league also has to have a move max. Let's talk about that.
No,
you don't think so at all?
No, it's fab, bro.
That's
Why
true.
do you need a max?
In fab, yes, but for free-for-alls, it becomes a little bit of a problem.
No, I don't think it does. I mean, because I play in leagues where they have fab and then first come, first serve. So most of the good players are taken in fab where you spent your budget. So I don't agree with the max stuff. Let people do what they want. If you're making that many moves anyway, you're probably in bad shape. Now, if it's a daily league in baseball,
right,
that's a little bit different. But I know Yahoo has the innings max and the games max. Some other sites might not. So if you're going to have that situation, you need some rules to negate it. Like, in fantasy basketball,
that's having a move max then.
No, it's not a move max. Again,
that's one of the things that eliminates it.
No, it's not. If you have fab, you don't need moves max.
That's true, but we're talking about specifically a daily league in baseball. I should have done a better job in addressing what specific league I was talking about. I'm talking one with daily roster moves where if a player is dropped, they go on waivers for a few days where everyone else is a free-for-all pickup.
If you have an innings max and a games limit, then I don't think it matters. You could have whatever moves you want because you still have to – I know Yahoo does the innings max and the games limit. CBS, I guess it depends on the product. I don't commissioners obviously have the ability to change. So, I don't mind the move stuff. Where it matters is if there's no limitations. And you could just like if someone can – this is obviously a unique year in baseball because we got 60 games. But if someone can get to 2,000 innings, yeah, I mean, it's crazy because now you're just piling up and accumulating where you're going to be in first in strikeouts and you have more opportunities for wins. So in that instance, it's different. So it all depends on how the setup is and what the rules are before we institute max moves.
Understood. Now, what about this? What about using waiver priority as a tiebreaker for fab? Meaning, let's say you and I have the same bid, the highest bid on a player, but you have 1 and I have the 2 spot. You get the player based off the tiebreaker, but then you go to the back of the line for tiebreakers. I think that's a way you still utilize waiver priority.
It's usually standings. It should be. So if we have the same record, but I have more points, then you'll get it. So that's usually how it goes. Some leagues might use the waiver priority, and that's fine there. I mean, that's not a big deal. And you do see ties sometimes. It does happen.
Right.
And I would also say for fab, don't ever bid 25, 100. People still do it. Come up with a different number, 103, 111. I still see people bidding like $100, $200. I'm like, come on, guys, really? Like, it's not going to work. You're going to bid 200. I'm going to go 203. I got them. Like,
so what do you think going 203 does? Because it's funny you're saying this because in the auctions article that just came out on fantasyalarm.com that I wrote up about strategies for auctions, I talked about not using numbers at the zeros to start a decade because once you reach that, people feel safer bidding. Then when you're at, let's just say 39 and you have the 9 bid, then someone may hesitate instead of going to that 40 spot in auctions. Is that kind of how you feel in this situation?
I think people's automatic inclination is, oh, yeah, but 100, 200, 150. No, you don't want to be there. You want to go a little above that. So if someone does go 150 and you go 153, he's yours. So that's the way I'll do it. In an auction, too, I mean, I don't know if you put this in there. I didn't get to read it yet, but jump bidding. That does work.
Yes.
It does work, man.
Dude, it works. It stops the brain from moving for your
Right.
opponent. It causes major paranoia and hesitation. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I'm not a doctor of fantasy like your buddy Dr. Roto either. But I will say this. I've been in plenty of bidding wars, and I've utilized that strategy, and it works 90% of the time until you bring it up like in this kind of forum. Now people start to look for it.
Yeah, but even so, like, fine, they hear about it now and it's in their mind. When you're still in that auction room, you have to react quickly. And some people don't. They'll hear, oh, 16. Someone goes 19. They're like, wait a second, what?
Right.
Now I got to go to 20. I was ready to go 17. Now I got to go 20. And they might pause. And that pause is enough time to think where they stall and they don't go to 20. And now you got them at 19 and maybe you had them priced at 21.
It's perfect. Again, anything that you could do to throw a left when they're expecting a right, especially, Ronis, when you're going back and forth dollar after dollar and you go past the 10 number mark, you then have to go to 2. And if you really want the player, you go 3 sometimes. You just mentioned a spot where you go 3. Absolutely, that makes your opponent hesitate after that.
Right. I mean, because if you are going back and forth, okay, they have interest in this player and they want him, you just kind of have to look at your values. And again, if you have them at 21, you're obviously willing to go to 21, and maybe you're even willing to go 22 or 23. So just jump that straight to 19 and put some pressure on your opponent who was in the bidding war, and they might just freeze and I was going to go to 18, but it's at 19. Now I got to go 20. You know what? I'm going to back out here.
Yes, and it's all a game. It literally is a game, especially with Fab, especially with auctions as well. Something else you could do, Ronis, and this is something that's not rocket science. Get intel from your league. Find out who they're interested in over the next few weeks, especially in football. It's very easy. Mondays, ask the question on Mondays. They're still reeling from the weekend. Their hearts are out emotionally. Maybe they're hanging on to a Monday night miracle for the Monday night game. That is when you attack the opposing teams to get information, players they want to target off of waivers, teams that they're looking to potentially trade with. Ronis, Mondays, just like it's Reaction Mondays on SiriusXM, it's vulnerable Mondays in fantasy football leagues, and that can often carry into Tuesday before waivers.
You have people in your league who tell you who they want on waivers?
All the time, man. All the time. All the time. Hook and sinker every time. And I'm telling all of you right now that I'm going to start asking some questions. And if you're in a league with me, you better plead the fifth, because with that, I'm going to continue to ask questions, and I'm going to do it right after a bad loss. Like, Ronis, when you lose by 45 points in one of your weeks, I'm coming after you being like, Adam, what does your team need? Let me help you. What are you looking for?
And I would ignore you. Like, I wouldn't talk to anyone. Like, people get mad. I have friends that get mad at me because I won't talk to them in July or August. And I'm like, well, you're in one of my leagues, so we're drafting against each other. So once the draft is done, we'll talk. I mean, obviously they can listen to my shows, read my work on Fantasy Alarm, but hey, if you're going to do that, then that means at least you're spending some money. So I'm okay with that. And I have to be open about that, but we're not going to have a conversation. I can't believe that anyone actually tells you and who's in a league with you who they're looking at on the waiver wire. That is so dumb. You must play with a lot of people who aren't sharp.
No, that's the thing, Ronis. I play with people who are sports guys too, and I'm not trying to take advantage or make like I'm this crazy industry expert. No, I'm a player just like anyone else. I'm a player. I'm not a huge high stakes player or anything like that. But yeah, Ronis, and I find it very interesting, Ronis, that you won't give any information, because I was going to ask you, with us being in the space, do we have a responsibility to our whole audience, including league mates, to tell them?
No, what? Why do I have a responsibility to players who are in my league? I owe them absolutely nothing. They're in my league. If they want my information, they know where to find it, right?
That's right.
Come to fantasyalarm.com. Pay for the draft kit. You get my rankings, and then you go against me. But I don't owe anyone anything. Like, if a friend calls me or something, and I know we're in a league, like I have a friend who I try not to talk much about football with him because we compete in my league together, and then we are league mates in another league. Now, fortunately, that draft is always the day after Labor Day. My league's usually somewhere mid-August, so I won't really talk much. He'll try to, have discussions, and I'm very low-key about players I like. Once that draft is over, then we can talk about players for that league. And then with the waiver wire, fortunately, the waiver wire in my league runs first. So once that is run, then we talk strategy that night for our other league. Yeah, man, you got to be like, I'm not trying to give him anything. If he wants information, he can listen to the shows and get it that way. I never hide anything from my audience. That's the other thing. It was like, I'm not hiding anything. You know, I come on and say it how it is. And anyone who follows my drafts knows. I mean, just go look at my FSGA draft. Go look at my fishbowl. These are players I've talked about how high I am on them. So I'm not one of these people who goes on here and tries to hide things. I'm very transparent. But I'm saying, like, if a friend calls me and we're in a league together, I don't owe him shit.
That's true.
I don't. He don't pay nothing to me, right? I don't owe anything.
Okay, let me ask you this, Ronis. Your friend calls you up, and he's facing someone else in your league and asks you for your advice.
And we're in the same league?
You're in the same league.
No, I'm not helping him. Not helping
him. I like that.
I'm battling him for a championship, right? Why am I trying to help him? So if I help him and he wins, now he gets a bye and I don't, and I played a part? No, man.
Right. So under no circumstances you're giving any advice to anyone that you're in the league with.
Right. Even if it's a league with like an overall championship. Like, I get mad when I'm playing in a high stakes league and someone in a different league is like asking me for waiver wire advice that week. I'm like, man, we're kind of competing for the overall too. Like, I don't know, because I don't do it. I don't ask people. I mean, look, you should always bounce ideas off people. You know, there's always a couple, you know, people will say, hey, man, what do you think? And they're, you know, I respect them as players and they're very good. So it's honor that they value my opinion. And I like to bounce things off people too. I mean, you should. No one knows everything. And it does help to discuss things with people, but not if you're in my league, man. I can't do it, man. I'm sorry. I'm just cutthroat like that.
No, I understand that. And I'm very much like that too. I take pretty much a code of silence. Now, if I'm going to fish for information and I have to give a little bit of kind of information back, it's all about playing secret agent. That's really what it's all about. But it's very important, and you can catch people at a very vulnerable time in their leagues, even right before the draft especially. Find out who they really like. Give them one player, have them give you 5. That's how you take advantage. But you're not beating Mr. Ronis, I'll tell you that much. You're not getting bleep from him, as he just said, here on Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. He's Adam Ronis. I'm Justin Fensterman. You can also catch us Tuesday through Thursday on Alarm After Hours on Sirius 210 XM87, Fantasy Sports Radio, midnight to 2 a.m. Eastern, including tonight. NBA football, we got it all. We're getting you ready. You're part of our family. You can't spell family without FA, Fantasy Alarm. We out. We always dominate. We just win.